When we speak about the mystery of life and death, few names stand out as much as Edgar Cayce, often called the sleeping prophet. His thousands of readings explored not just health and healing, but also the soul's journey through birth, life, death, and beyond. Among the questions he was asked was one that still troubles people today. Does the soul feel pain during cremation? Before we go deeper into Cayce's insights, welcome to Reflections and Mindfulness. If you find value in exploring life's mysteries and the wisdom of teachers like Edgar Cayce, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue creating thoughtful content and guiding you through questions that many hesitate to ask. Cayce explained that the body is not the soul, but rather a temporary vessel that houses it during earthly life. When the body dies, the soul does not cling to flesh and bone. Instead, it begins a process of separation, gently withdrawing from the physical form. According to Cayce's work, what we call death is not an ending, but a transition into a higher state of awareness. This is why he said, cremation does not cause pain to the soul. The fire acts only upon the physical body, which is no longer inhabited in the same way. The soul, detached and free, observes without the suffering that we might imagine from a purely material perspective. Cayce's readings often reassured families who feared that a loved one might feel the flames, explaining instead that the moment of death is accompanied by release, by peace, and by a sense of awakening. As we move deeper into this discussion, we will explore how Cayce described the experience of the soul during this process, what sensations are left behind, and why he urged us not to fear the transition. Instead of dread, his words invite us to look at cremation and death itself with reverence, understanding, and even comfort. When we think about the end of life, many questions come to the surface. One of the most common questions people quietly hold inside is what happens to the spirit during the moment of cremation. The body is something we understand. It is physical. It returns to the earth. It becomes ash. But the spirit, the essence that animates us, is more mysterious. Is there pain? Does the soul feel what the body undergoes? Or has it already moved on to a place beyond sensation? These are not only practical questions, they are deeply emotional, touching on our fears of death and our hope for peace beyond it. To begin, it's important to recognize the distinction between the body and the spirit. Spiritual traditions from all over the world, whether they come from Eastern philosophies, ancient teachings, or modern spiritual insights, consistently teach that the body is a vessel. It carries us through life. It experiences hunger, thirst, warmth, and pain. But the spirit is understood as something different. It is energy. It is consciousness. It is awareness itself. And once the body reaches the moment of death, the connection between body and spirit changes in a very profound way. This is where we can pause for a moment to welcome you to our channel, Reflections in Mindfulness. If you are new here, thank you for joining us. We explore questions about the soul, the mysteries of consciousness, and ways to find calm in the journey of life. If these topics speak to you, we invite you to subscribe and become part of this community. Together, we can reflect on the questions that matter most to the human heart. Now, when asking whether the spirit feels pain during cremation, we must first consider the moment of death itself. According to many spiritual sources, including near-death experiences and teachings from figures like Edgar Cayce, the soul begins its departure at the time the body ceases to function. Breath slows, the heart stops, and with that stillness, the spirit begins to separate. This transition is often described not as painful, but as a release. People who have been resuscitated after clinical death often speak of floating above their body, seeing light, or feeling a sense of peace that is far removed from suffering. This suggests that by the time cremation takes place, the soul has already moved away from the physical form. The body remains, but the awareness that once felt pain no longer resides within it. Think of it like a garment. Once you take off a shirt, it no longer carries your warmth, your presence, or your life. The shirt exists, but you are no longer inside of it. Similarly, the spirit leaves behind the body, which is then cared for by loved ones, and the rituals of burial or cremation. Of course, different cultures hold different beliefs about how quickly the spirit departs. In some traditions, it is believed the soul lingers near the body for hours or even days after death, observing, saying farewell, or preparing for its next journey. In these perspectives, cremation is not something the soul feels in a physical sense, but it may be something the spirit witnesses symbolically as a moment of transformation. The fire is seen as purifying, as a way of releasing what is no longer needed, returning the body to the elements from which it came. The symbolic meaning of fire has always been powerful in human culture. Fire warms us, protects us, and transforms everything it touches. Spiritually, fire is often connected with renewal, with the cleansing of old forms to make way for new beginnings. So, while the physical body undergoes the intense process of cremation, the soul itself is thought to be beyond the reach of heat or flame. Instead, it may perceive this act as a final step of letting go, a ritual that frees it to move fully into the spiritual realm. It is also worth remembering that accounts from people who have been near death consistently describe a sense of detachment from the body. They speak of watching medical teams work on them without feeling pain or hearing voices while floating above. These stories are echoed across cultures and time periods, suggesting a universal truth that consciousness continues even when the body has stopped, and that pain belongs to the body, not the soul. So the question of whether the spirit feels pain during cremation may not be about the fire at all. Instead, it is about how we understand the relationship between body and spirit. If the spirit has moved on, then the cremation is simply the respectful handling of what is left behind. If the spirit lingers, then fire becomes a sacred symbol, not a source of suffering, but of release and purification. In many traditions, the process of cremation is not viewed with fear, but with reverence. The body is entrusted to the fire as a sacred act, a way of honoring the life that was lived and setting free the soul to continue its journey. The flames are not thought of as harming the spirit because the spirit has already moved beyond the limits of the body. Instead, the fire is seen as a bridge between worlds, consuming what is physical and leaving behind only what cannot be destroyed, the essence that lives on. It may help to remember that across cultures, fire has always been a symbol of purification. Think of how in rituals, candles are lit to signify the presence of the divine, or how in many faiths, fire represents transformation. When wood is burned, it does not vanish completely. It changes form into light, heat, and ash. In the same way, cremation is not the end of the person, but a transformation of the body, while the soul continues its existence beyond. For those who grieve, this understanding can bring comfort, as it reframes the flames, not as a final destruction, but as a release. There are also teachings that emphasize the importance of the state of mind at the moment of death. Some spiritual philosophies encourage preparing for this transition through meditation, prayer, or mindful living. The idea is that the soul's journey after death is influenced by the level of peace or turmoil carried at that time. From this view, the body's condition after death, whether burial or cremation, matters far less than the consciousness the spirit carries as it departs. Pain and suffering are left with the body, while awareness travels on to meet what comes next. People often wonder if loved ones who have passed are aware of what happens to their remains. Do they know they are being cremated? Do they see the ceremony or hear the prayers? Spiritual accounts suggest that souls sometimes linger briefly, not to experience pain, but to witness the love and respect being offered. They may sense the presence of family members, feel the emotions of farewell, or even comfort those who mourn, yet they do not experience the flames as pain. Rather, they perceive the act symbolically, as though the body is being lovingly returned to the elements. This perspective helps us to understand why so many cultures have embraced cremation as a sacred ritual. Far from being an act of harm, it is an expression of reverence, a final gesture of care. The body is treated not as waste, but as something precious, carried into transformation by the sacred fire. For the soul, there is no suffering in this process, because suffering belongs to the body, and the body is no longer its home. There is also another dimension to consider, the grieving process of those who remain. For families, seeing the body reduced to ashes can be a powerful reminder of impermanence. Yet when approached with understanding, it can also be deeply healing. The fire, in its consuming power, leaves behind only what is essential. For loved ones, this can mirror their own emotional journey, burning away the sharpness of grief and leaving only the warmth of memory and love. In this sense, cremation becomes not only a ritual for the dead, but a ritual for the living, helping us to let go and accept the mystery of what lies beyond. Ultimately, whether one believes the spirit moves on instantly, lingers briefly, or watches over loved ones, the message is the same. The flames do not bring suffering to the soul. Pain is tied to the body, and the spirit is greater than that. The act of cremation is not a source of fear, but of transformation, release, and sacred passage. As we continue reflecting on this question, it is natural to wonder how we ourselves might face this transition one day. What can we learn from the idea that the spirit does not feel the fire? One lesson is that fear belongs mostly to the mind. We imagine what flames would feel like. We project our experience of pain onto what we think might come after death. But the teaching here is gentle. The soul is beyond those sensations. The part of us that feels heat and pain does not carry over. What continues is awareness, and that awareness is free. For many people, this understanding brings peace. If you have ever sat with a loved one at the end of their life, you may have noticed a moment when their face softened, as if they were letting go of a heavy weight. Their breathing slowed, their hands grew still, and then there was quiet. In that moment, suffering seemed to lift away. It is as though the body finally yielded and the spirit stepped into a new chapter. This moment of release is why so many traditions teach that the soul does not suffer once the body is gone. By the time cremation begins, the spirit is already elsewhere, no longer bound to nerves, muscles, or pain. Stories from near-death experiences support this view. Again and again, people report leaving their body and observing events around them without discomfort. They describe a sense of clarity, light, and sometimes the presence of loving beings. The recurring theme is peace, not pain. This aligns with the idea that cremation is simply a ritual for the body, not an ordeal for the soul. In this light, the act is neither frightening nor harmful, but part of the natural order of returning elements back to the earth. When we understand cremation in this way, it changes how we think about death itself. Instead of imagining suffering in the flames, we can imagine freedom. The fire becomes a symbol of passage, of transformation, of a doorway through which the body returns to dust and the spirit steps into eternity. This shift in perspective is powerful because it allows us to approach death not with dread, but with reverence. For those who remain behind, it also brings comfort. Our loved ones are not suffering in the fire. They are at peace, watching from beyond or already journeying into new realms. This is why many teachers suggest preparing ourselves now while we are alive, to live with awareness, to cultivate peace in our daily lives, to let go of unnecessary fear. These practices shape how we will meet our final moment. If we understand that the body is only temporary and that the soul continues beyond it, we can live more fully now, appreciating every breath without clinging to what must eventually be released. In this sense, reflection on cremation is not only about death, but about life. It reminds us to honor the present moment, to love deeply, and to trust that letting go is part of the journey. So, to return to the question, does the spirit feel pain during cremation? The answer, across traditions, stories, and spiritual wisdom, is no. The flames consume the body, but the soul is already free. What remains is symbolic, a reminder of impermanence, a ritual of transformation, a gesture of reverence. For those of us still walking this earth, it offers reassurance that death does not mean suffering, but release. It is a transition into a state where pain no longer reaches and where peace becomes the final companion.